welcome to the Lytec ICD10 webinar. My name is Lance Foster. I am the president of AZCOMP Technologies. Appreciate everyone being with us this morning, and I'm going to cover a couple of housekeeping items and then introduce our speaker for this morning. First is the webinar will last approximately 90 minutes, and then we'll have time for Q&A. You'll notice if you've used GoToWebinar before, you'll notice on the right side you have the opportunity to ask questions. Go ahead and write your questions in there. You may not get answers immediately during the webinar, but we will answer those questions at the end of the webinar, where we'll go to the Q&A section. So as you get questions, go ahead and just pop them down there, and then we'll address them at the end. Secondly, we are recording this event, so we'll do our best to provide the recorded webinar via email within a few days. So the webinar that you've signed in to this webinar with, the email you've used, that's what you'll get the email with the recorded webinar. So if it's something different, let us know. Send us where you want it to send to, and we'll do it. Okay. So for those that might know, our purpose, what we do here at AZCOMP Technologies, is what drives us, what we are passionate about, what we're excited about doing, is we really do see ourselves as an instrument for you guys to help empower you. And that's our goal, really, is to empower your small practices to deliver the best care. At the end of the day, we know that you guys have pressures from everywhere. The expenses continue to rise. Your reimbursements continue to decrease. We see the sandwich happening, and we're doing everything we can to help bring information, knowledge, everything that will help your practice stay surviving in a world that just keeps turning and changing. So our goal is to really try to bring as much information to you to help you make the best possible decisions. And of course, with the ICD10, this is one of the biggest industry changes that has ever happened, specifically for the medical industry. So we're going to try to cover the things that are specific with Lytec, with ICD10, and we're going to help you do that. So there's a couple of big objectives we're hoping you guys walk away with from this event. Number one, we want you to understand all that is required with ICD10. We also want to make sure that after you hear all that's required, that you set up a plan, because this isn't just a crash course, hey, after this 90 minutes you're ready to go. This is more of a teaser of anything. This is a moment to recognize all that's going to be happening, a preview of the things that are coming forth, and then you're going to have to go and make a plan to how you're going to make your practice ready for this transition. Thirdly, we want to make sure you understand how to use the tools, which is why we're recording this event, and we're also going to make it available for you so you can see how they work, and you can practice it before it actually happens, and you're ready and prepared, and so that you have the least amount of cash flow problems as possible. Because the reality is, with this kind of transition that's happening, this is going to be a make it or break it point for a lot of practices. You've got to be able to be ready, because in my opinion, I don't think the insurance companies are going to be all that friendly and okay with ignorance. Ignorance is not going to work, and certainly, I'm sorry, the insurance company never really works. So that's why we want to make sure we're using the right codes, getting paid, and continue going forward. The next thing is, I want you to understand where you can get help. Not only the resources that we're going to provide, but we're going to provide you links and information of places you can find more information on ICD10 and how to be ready. Because way beyond the software, there's going to be quite a bit of stuff you're going to need to know in regards to ICD10. And so with that, I'm going to now introduce who our speaker is going to be. It's going to be LOREE OLSEN. LOREE OLSEN's been with our company since 2001. She is a member of the Product Advisory Board at McKesson. So she helps participate in helping not only do testings and so forth, but helps introduce new ideas and new features and what we want to put in Lytec, how we want Lytec to get better, the different things that go along with that. So from that, I'm going to turn the time now to LOREE, and she's going to take it from here, and then I'll wrap it up at the end.
All right, thanks, Lance, and welcome everybody. This picture, this is actually Lance over here in the corner from way back in 2001, so over a decade ago, and myself and some of the early people that are still with AZCOMP are in there back when we had a lot more time on our hands to do things like play cards when it rains. With ICD10 coming, there's definitely no time for any of that stuff anymore. Just to introduce myself a little bit more, again, I'm LOREE OLSEN, and just a few little personal things about me. My pride and joy are my two little miracles at home and my husband as well, and one of my favorite things to do is to take pictures, especially of my boys when they're being mischief or being naughty, and that was a little recent mud fight they had together. So with that, I'm going to move on to what everyone's here for today, which is to find out more about ICD10 and the Lytec solution. So I did want to mention what is not included today. This is not ICD10 coding training. So we're not going to be covering how to properly code using ICD10 or show medical necessity in order to get your payment. So I point that out because we do highly recommend that if you have not already, that you're getting ICD10 coding training through an accredited resource, and we're often asked who we recommend for that. Some of the accredited resources that we do recommend are the AAPC and the HIMA. So those are a few places that offer actually online training. They also offer live trainings and things like that, but it's so close to the deadline here. If you're still in need of getting training, or I've even had some practices that trained way back early last year, getting ready for October of last year, and might need a refresher on those things. Those resources offer online trainings that you can do after hours and things like that. So the other resource that I'd point out is roadto10.org. That one is a free resource from CMS that has a wealth of information on it. And I am going to actually pull up their website just to show you, because Lance mentioned that one of the things that we want you to do is make sure that you have a plan in place. Hopefully you're well into your plans at this point, and you're just doing this one slice of the plan, which is to make sure that your software is properly set up. I think sometimes there are some misconceptions that all you need to do is make sure you have new software. Well, there is actually a ton more to ICD10 implementation than that. You can go to the roadto10.org, and there are planning tools on there. If you haven't visited that before, it's a great resource to kind of give you an overview of all the things that you want to do. Because we are going to really just focus on the setup in Lytec today, but there's a ton of other things that need to be considered as part of your plan, such as updating forms, making sure your documentation is supportive. You might have authorizations and things like that that touch on a lot of different aspects in your practice, a lot more aspects in your practice than just the billing portion, like just what you're sending out on a claim. So did want to point that out for you. All right, and I'm going to switch back over here to, oops, sorry. Okay, so those are some resources. Just a little disclaimer, of course, we're going to make every effort to give you up-to-date and accurate information, but as changes are coming, just make sure you're staying abreast of those changes. This is all accurate as of today, but you're going to get recordings of this and everything else, and just make sure you're checking and keeping up to date with changes as they're coming out. All right, so the ICD10 deadline, we all know that it's October 1st, 2015 now, but there is sometimes a misconception out there that you can just flip a switch and start billing in ICD10. We've had a lot of calls even the last few months or so about being involved in testing and things like that, and what we're finding is that people haven't gone through proper steps to set up the product for ICD10, so we want to make sure that you're aware of those. So it is more than just flipping a switch. It's almost that easy, but there is going to be, you just need to make sure you know where to go to make all the changes in order to get to there. There are a few exceptions to the rule, and I want to bring these up because they may impact your practice. So the first, well, the exception is that non-HIPAA compliant payers, such as workers' compensation and auto insurance companies, may choose not to implement ICD-10 codes. So be aware that if you're a practice that deals with any of those types of payers, that you need to be checking to find out if they are going to be requiring ICD-10 after that date, or if they're still going to be requiring ICD-9, because some of them might not be ready yet to accept ICD-10 and they're not required to be. So you may still have to submit some claims. So it really presents a challenge for some of our practices, because you may have some payers that still need to be billed with IC9 codes after that October 1st date. And then other payers, the majority of them, all of your commercial payers and the commercial government payers, are going to be requiring ICD-10. So that does present a challenge for us when we look at billing. And the second part of that exception is, besides just having some that may do one or the other, you might have scenarios where you have claims where there's both a primary and a secondary insurance, and depending on those individual carriers, there might be, you know, the primary might want an ICD-10 and the secondary might want an ICD-9. Again, if you're dealing with any of those exceptions to the rule. So we needed to have a way for you to be able to manage that in your system without you pulling your hair out to try to code claims and know when to flip things and things like that. So I'm going to cover the features that have been built into the system that are going to help you manage that without you really having to think about it. All right, the next thing to clarify, and I think CMS announced that this was the #1 misunderstood concept about that ICD-10 implementation deadline, and that is that I think some people think that once that date comes, any claim you send out of your office has to have ICD-10 codes on it. And that's actually not correct, because the date is based off of the date of service. So you may have scenarios where maybe you're entering charges for September, but you're not entering them into the system until into October. Those charges would still need to go out with IC9 codes on them, because the date of service for when the patient was seen was back in September when IC9 was still in effect. All right, so that does also, again, present a challenge for us, because if you have claims with dates of service that are prior, you still need to bill them out with IC9s, and if you have any rebill claims, so claims that you've already submitted that you need to resubmit to insurance, they're not expecting and they're not wanting you to rebill those with ICD-10 codes because you're billing them after October 1st. You would still need to rebill them with the original ICD-9 codes. Okay. And then, of course, there is training and testing, and hopefully you're well into your ICD-10 training, but you do need to start. You know, it's always better to try to do trial runs and test runs and things like that prior to a deadline, so that you can feel confident going into that deadline. So as you're getting close to that deadline, it does still present a challenge, because you might want to be learning and trying to code an ICD-10, but you still want to get your claims out with IC9 codes on it, so that can present a challenge as well. So I'm going to pause for a moment. So that with all those kind of challenges that are presented to us, how can Lytec help us so that we're not having to manually figure those things out? So I'm going to go ahead and jump over into Lytec now. Pull it up for you. And we're going to talk about the things that you need to do to set up your codes, and then and to get you ready for that. So the first thing that is going to help us with those initial challenges, which is that you may have some insurances that require ICD-9 and some that don't, is we're going to look at the changes under the insurance company. So if you pull up your insurance company window, you're going to see that for your insurances, there's a new field for the diagnosis code set that should be used on claims. So therefore, if we can set at the insurance level to tell the system whether to pull an IC9 or an IC10, you're not going to have to remember. You're going to allow the system to do that for you. So you'll see when you set this up, you can either choose, hey, this is a carrier that is accepting IC9, or they're accepting IC10. today you can go and set it that they're going to be using ICD10, and you need to put what we call the effective date. So even though we're setting it to ICD10, we're saying, hey, but you still need to use ICD9 codes for any dates of service that are prior to, and then you're going to put that the effective date for that insurance. So again, keep in mind that you can set this up today for ICD10, and it's not going to change anything for your claims that are going out today because it'll still know to pull the ICD9 codes. If you are one of those practices that does deal with work comp or auto injury, then you would need to, this effective date might not be October 1st for those insurance companies. You might not have an effective date yet. So you would leave those other individual insurance companies that are the exception to the rule. If you don't know the effective date for them yet, you can just set them as IC9. And as those effective dates are announced to you, so as those insurances come on board, if they're not on already, then you would put in the effective date that that insurance provides for you of when they're going to start accepting ICD-10 coded claims. All right. So that's going to be your step one, is to make sure that at the insurance level you're indicating whether or not the insurance wants ICD-9 or ICD-10 and when they're going to be accepting ICD-10. And again, if it's unknown, then you're going to just leave that at ICD-9. All right. We were kind enough, though, because most of you have an extensive insurance list, to not make you have to go through every insurance and set those effective dates up. So there is a tool I did want to show you on this level, so that if you do have to add any insurances to your practice, or if you're dealing with those exceptions to the rule and you need to pull them up and just edit those ones quickly, you can do it right from that insurance company list. However, if you go to your tools menu over here, you'll see that there's a new ICD-10 tools feature. So if you come in here, you'll see that there is a set insurance code setting. And if you open that up, you'll see that you can select all of your insurances, for example. You can sort them by type. So if I selected all my insurances, but I wanted to uncheck these two down here because they're work comp, then I can say, hey, for all these, go ahead and set the default as ICD-10, and I want to still use ICD-9 codes up until 10/1 of 2015. Okay. And then you can just say update selected, and that will update all of your codes for all the carriers for you. Now, you can also, if you have a handful of those that you're going to be doing with the ICD-9, select those and just set those as ICD-9. You'll see that everything else will gray out, and you can update the update those selections as well, so that all of your pairs are set. Okay. So that is your set insurance code tool that's going to be off of that tools menu under your ICD-10 tools. So if you haven't done that already, then make sure that you go into your system and set your insurances so that the system knows which codes to pull and the date that it should start pulling them. All right, the next thing that we're going to look at is under our list. We're going to talk about the different ways that you can set up your ICD-10 code. So we do get that question often. It's probably the most common question that we get is, does my system come with ICD-10 codes preloaded in it? It does not. And how do I get them in? So I'm going to cover, there's actually 5 different ways that you can load ICD-10 codes into Lytec. So I'm going to cover each of those ways. All right, so if you come back to your list, to your diagnosis code list, the first way is going to be probably your most obvious way, right? And that's going to be to come in here and hit New and to add your diagnosis codes. So you'll see that this window has changed slightly. Diagnosis code up here is really what we would consider your internal code. So it's the code that you're going to see when you're doing your postings or anything else. This is not the code that will get pulled onto your claim, so you can literally put anything that you wanted in that field. Probably the most common practice, though, is that when you set up your ICD-9 codes, you just went ahead and put your ICD-9 code there, because that's probably the most common way people will look it up. I would recommend, if you're setting up your ICD-10 codes, to go ahead and put your ICD-10 code there. So I'm going to just set up a new code. Well, looks like I've already started setting that one up. But you'll see that once you set this up, you can put in your description there. And then I'm just going to call it acute dominant pain. And you'll see there's actually these little copy tools down here. So I can copy it down here. If I wanted to copy it to ICD-9 as well, I can. But this is where it's different. This is what we call our mapping section. So back when we set up our insurances and we told the insurance whether or not to pull the ICD-9 or the ICD-10, when I use this code in my system, if my insurance is set to pull an ICD-10 code, it's going to look for whatever is in this field. So these are the fields that you want to have match exactly what you would want to go on the claim if you were billing it for either ICD-10 or ICD-9. And we do allow you to have a mapping to both codes. So if you are one of those practices that may be dealing with that after October 1st, that you have an insurance company that needs an ICD-9 and then a secondary that needs an ICD-10, you can still use one code on your billing, and the insurance is set so that it knows which code to actually send on the claim itself. Now that will only work if you, of course, have it mapped to both an ICD-9 and an ICD-10. So I would go ahead and put in here my ICD-9 code that it maps to. Okay. So if I were manually setting it up, then you can manually set up your codes by doing that method. Again, you're not required to have the mapping for both, but if you are one of those scenarios where either one, you want to start using and testing your codes today prior to that October 1st deadline, and you still want the claims to go out with an ICD-9, you can start setting up your ICD-10s. And since you have it mapped based off of that data service, the insurance will still pull the ICD-9 if that ICD-9 field is filled out. After October 1st, it would no longer look at that ICD-9 code. So it is possible, if you are still going to just try to manage the two lists, to only set it up with the ICD-10 code. But that is why the mapping is there, is to, one, help you with that transition into ICD-10. It also can kind of help you when you're doing your lookups, because if you're used to your ICD-9 code and you search for any codes that you have with that ICD-9 map, you could see what all of your options would be for ICD-10 if you have them set up that way. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. So that is the first method that you could use to, and that is to just manually create your ICD-10 codes. Again, we're kind enough to take advantage of some of the things that CMS had released for you. So we do have another tool that you can use that comes with the system, and that is, if you go under your tools menu over here, you'll have under your ICD-10 tools this tool that's called Create ICD-10 Mappings. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and open that up. So the way that this tool works is it is going to look at any of the codes that you currently have in your system. So any of your ICD-9 codes that are already in that diagnosis list, and then it's going to suggest, based off of the GEMs, the General Equivalency Mappings that were published by CMS, it's going to suggest any of the ICD-10 codes that are on that list. So right now when I'm clicking over, you have two different options. You have one that's called our one-to-one mappings. And then, so what this is doing is it's looking at in this data set that I'm in right now, these are all my existing ICD-9 codes. And you can see that it found on that GEM list a one-to-one mapping for that. So if I wanted to then select these, and you can select them one at a time, or you can do the select all option if you want to just create everything that's on there. But if I do that, then what it's going to do, it's not going to update the code that I have in my system. it's actually going to create a brand new code that has both the ICD-9 and the ICD-10 mapped in it, and where code, your internal code, is your ICD-10 code. All right? So it's going to help you build out your ICD-10 library with the codes that are common based off of what you already use. Now, one thing that you need to be aware of with this, the one thing I love about it is it's not going to clog up your whole diagnosis list with all these diagnoses in the library that you don't use for ICD-10, but one, it has the mappings, and it is going to be more accurate because there's not room for user error when you're doing that. In other words, you're not going to be miskeying a code or anything like that. But on the downside, if you kind of look through this list, sometimes there is a one-to-one match where it's straightforward like this, like typhoid fever. But if you look through here, by and large, it's going to give you what we call the unspecified codes. So it's not going to be, I don't want anyone to go away with the impression that all you need to do is use this mapping tool and you're going to have every ICD-10 code that you need in your system. The things that, so by and large, it's going to map you to what we call an unspecified code. Some of the features in ICD-10, if you've done any of your ICD-10 training already, one of the reasons why the code set expanded so much is because there's features like laterality, like your left and your right, and trimesters and things like that. So this is going to give you the unspecified code, but it's not going to give you the lefts and the rights and things like that. So you may find that you may still need to add additional codes to your system in addition to these, but this is going to be a great start for you. All right. So this is how you, again, and some people will use this as an opportunity to clean up their list. I know as I've been helping practices implement or get ready for ICD-10, they've come in and they've realized they've got, you know, a big history of codes that they've used, but there's, you know, sometimes codes that you don't use in your practice any longer. So it does allow you to kind of go through these one at a time. And you'll notice if I only select one and I say create selected code, it's going to remove that off my list. So you can actually use this as like a work list feature for you. So you can either go through them, it's telling me it was created, and you can see it's no longer on my list now. So I'm only getting presented with my remaining ICD-9 codes that I haven't created any mappings for yet. Okay? So, and again, if you're comfortable and you just want to do them all at once, you can select all and just create selected codes from that. All right, so those are our one-to-one mappings. Sometimes under ICD-10, it's not as straightforward as a one-to-one map, and we have one-to-multiple mapping. So you do have a tab over here called Other Mappings, and you'll see that it's a split screen. So if I select one code up here at the top, it's going to show me the multiple mappings that it has for this under ICD-10. So you still get to pick and choose like what things you want loaded. Like sometimes you might find things that I've seen a code that maps to like 160 different codes, things like that. You will see that even under the multiple mappings, a lot of times you're going to still see more of the unspecified codes. So I do want you to, again, be aware that it just might not be enough, but it is a great start for you. Okay? So it works in a similar way. You're just going to check off the ones that you want, and then you're going to create the selected codes, and that will add new codes to your diagnosis library for you. All right. So that's the second way. I do want to pause for a moment. I know I've just started talking about the unspecified codes and things like that. And I know there's a lot of uncertainty about this October 1st date. We do our very best as we get industry news to push that information out to you. So if you're not already aware, we have a blog. It's just go to azcomp.com/blog. You can subscribe to our blog up here, so anytime we post something new, it'll automatically be emailed to you, so you don't necessarily have to go and monitor it. But I did want to point out that that many of you may have heard about this grace period for ICD10 that CMS announced. I believe it was back in July. As we get information like that, we do post it to the blog to keep you up to date on any of the industry type news. But on the good side, I did want to point out that just for Medicare only, so for your claims, they have said that their claims with non-specific codes are still going to get paid. So they have given you a 1-year grace period to learn your new codes and to start. They're basically saying like, hey, we're not going to deny a claim as long as the code that you're submitting is from the same code family. So if this time you forgot to do the left or the right or whatever and you sent me the unspecified code, we're still going to get you paid. So I did want to point that out, that is available. Some people have misinterpreted that the grace period means that they can still send ICD-9 codes. That is not the case. They're still requiring that you send an ICD-10 code. They're just going to be a little bit more lenient with you right now on still pushing some of those through and getting them paid while you're learning the new code set. Now, keep in mind, though, that this is this is a CMS announcement only. So if you bill other insurance companies, there's a good chance they're not going to be as lenient on you. A lot of them may follow this, follow CMS in this, but a lot of them may not. I don't think, like Lance pointed out before, I don't think it's always the first. They're not always super eager to get everybody paid. So anyway, there's some other things about that grace period that are up there, but I did want to just point out that that's a resource to you, first of all, and then just to clarify some of that information that people have questions on what that grace period is, and that, hey, especially since we're talking about that code mapping tool, it's a really great start because it's going to get you to October 1st, and then as you're learning the code, you can add the more specified codes in as you go along. All right. Okay, so let's jump back into Lytec now, and we're going to talk about the other options we have for loading your ICD-10 codes. Besides the code mapping tool and manual entry, you can also purchase, it is an add-on product, but we do have a code import tool. So you basically purchase a file of all of the ICD-10 codes, and then you can load those into your system. So the way that you do that is if you've made that purchase, you're going to go to your Tools menu, and you can go to Import right here, and then you'll see that there's Diagnosis Code. And essentially what you get with that purchase is a file. So you would point it to wherever that file is that you've copied down or stored to your hard drive. And then you're going to, it does come with both ICD-9 and ICD-10 codes. So if you are still someone that is needing to bill an ICD-9 or anything like that, and maybe you just purchased Lytec, you can import your ICD-9 codes. But otherwise, you would just select your ICD-10 codes and then go ahead and open that file, and it will actually give you the entire library of all the ICD-10 CM codes. So you would get all 68,000 loaded into your system. Approximately 68,000. So that is an option that's available to you. One thing I will point out on that one, those codes that are imported are not going to be mapped to ICD-9. So they will import the ICD-10 codes and create them for you. However, there's not going to be a mapped ICD-9 for those codes. So again, may or may not be a big deal for your practice, because if you're not one of those exceptions to the rule where you're trying to handle payers that want an ICD-9 and payers that want an ICD-10, then you only deal with ICD-10. That might be a really good option for you, just to get all of your codes built in the system. On the good side, it's quick, it's accurate, and it's all loaded. So, and if you are a billing service or anything like that, or a practice that has multiple databases, it's also a convenient way to load codes into multiple databases. All right. So that's how you're going to, that's an option that's available to you. The next option that's available to you is also an add-on product. So I'm going to show you that. I'm going to go back to my list over here under Diagnosis Codes, And you're going to see in here, if I do a new code, actually let me click on my search here, it's this tool right here, Encoder Pro. So Encoder Pro is also an add-on product, so there is cost to it. However, the cost of it is generally not much more or equal to what you may be spending on coding books. So besides just giving you diagnosis codes, it is also going to give you CPT codes as well, so it can help you build your procedures list as well. But it is, I like to think of it as a tool that replaces your coding book, so you don't need to purchase them anymore. Encoder Pro goes above and beyond what, it's not just like a code import tool, it actually gives you all the same features and more that you would get in your coding book. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this right here and show you how that works. And it's actually launching off of the one I have selected, but I'm going to go ahead and just, one of the benefits of it is that you can use common or lay terms when you're using Encoder Pro. So sometimes if you're searching for a code, you're not always sure of what the clinical term might have been, right? Might not always know exactly what the description is for the code that I'm looking for, because your practice may refer to it differently than what the medical book does, right? So you can use lay terms. So instead of looking up gastroesophageal reflux disease or anything like that, I can just search using that term, and you can see that it's given me, I can look for just my ICD10 results or ICD9 results. The reason I say it replaces your coding books is because as you drill down on these, like if I select one of these, it's going to tell me all the same information I would find in my book, which is, hey, a fourth character is required on that, or what might be excluded if I tried to use that code. And you can see, for one, it's going to be much faster. It's like using a phone book versus using Google, right? It's going to be much faster to locate your codes versus thumbing through a book and then having to thumb to another page and things like that. It's going to show me all my results in one screen. And if I needed to jump into one of these other, diagnosis, like, oh, well, it excludes that, and that's actually relevant to what I'm doing, you can see you can jump into that. It gives you some alerts down here. You can actually do some bookmarking and a lot of other cool things, but I'm going to stick to some of the basics for us. So once we find the code that we want to import into our system, you can see up here, I found it under ICD10. If I had gone the opposite way and I had looked for something that I already know under ICD9, it would actually, I could actually map to ICD10 by finding it in ICD9 first. So either way you search for the code or find your code, once it's selected, you'll see that I can now, besides just having this ICD10 code, I can click on ICD9, and I can find, based off of those gems from CMS, a more specific code. There's also Optimum, which is another resource for code mapping. So besides just the gems, you can look on that tab as well, and that might suggest some other mappings for you. So once you find the mapping, you can just say map. You'll see that it's going to load both my ICD10 and my ICD9 code. And then when I hit OK, it's going to add it to my library for me. So one of the nice things is you really have access to the entire code set library, the whole manual, all the little tips and tricks and everything that are in there. And again, not just for your diagnosis codes, but it'll also give you information for your CPT codes and modifiers and things like that that can help you on the billing side. So once you have access to the full library, but you can maintain in Lytec just the list of the ones that you use for billing. So on the downside, though, that is going to be, it's going to import just one at a time. So it's not like a bulk import, but if you need to look up or add a code to your system, like maybe you've already used the mapping tool and you just want to verify that there's not a more specific code, you can search for those and find the more specific codes using that method. All right, so that is a way, another way that you can load your ICD10 codes. The last way, I'm not really going to show you this way, but there are, if you are using Lytec MD for, for your electronic medical records, or if you're using McKesson Practice Choice, which is our online, our cloud-based electronic medical record that interfaces with or is integrated with Lytec. If you're using either one of those methods, then you know that during your documentation you're able to capture procedures in your diagnosis, and that both of those products have been ICD-10 ready for some time. So since you're already coding in ICD-10 over there, if you're using the electronic encounter forms in Lytec MD, those transactions, when they transmit over, will actually create your ICD-10 with the ICD-9 maps for you. So if it's code that's not already in your system, it'll actually just add it to the system for you. And same thing if you're using the cloud-based product for your electronic medical records and you're capturing procedures and charges over there, you can send those charges into Lytec, and you'll see under your billings, those come into your pending transactions section. So any of the diagnoses that are sent over from there, they will be mapped with the ICD-10 and the ICD-9, and it will automatically add them to your list for you if it's a code that is new to your system. So that is a fifth way to get codes in, is by simply sending transactions over from those EHR systems. All right, so I'm going to go through just a quick review of that for us. Those are the 5 different ways. Your manual entry, or you can use the mapping tool. Those first 2 are, of course, included with your product. Codes on disk and Encoder Pro are other optional ways to get your ICD-10 codes loaded. They are additional costs, but they can be a great time saver for you. And then the last one is, again, if you have one of our EHR products that's compatible with Lytec MD or McKesson Practice Choice, just sending those over will come. So just to review the pros on the manual entry, I think one of the big pros on it is really your code's your way, right? Like if you're used to searching for it by a certain description or anything like that, you can always add your own descriptions. You're not stuck with some of those more medical type terms. But on the downside, it is going to be your most time-consuming option, and you are leaving yourself open for room for human error. So if you miskey something, you might be transmitting a code, but it still might not be a code that's going to get paid or rejected. All right. And then the ICD-10 mapping tool, great way to, quick and easy way to load codes based on the ICD-9 codes that are already in your system. So there's really not any downside to that. The only downside is that it's only it might not be enough. So just keep in mind when you use that tool, just don't expect it to be an end-all be-all type tool, because by and large you are going to get all of your unspecified codes loaded, which again is a great start for you, but you still may need to add additional codes to your system to get those more specific codes in there. All right, and then codes on disk, or the Lytec code import. Pro on that is just that it's a bulk import. It's going to get your codes loaded super fast. Just keep in mind that it does not include any mappings between ICD-9 and ICD-10. So if you are one of those practices that's going to have to deal with some carriers on ICD-9 and some on ICD-10, you would be probably a bit more of a headache if you have codes that are not mapped, because you'll have to be more aware of the codes that you're using at the time of entering. All right. And then the last, sorry, not the last one, the other option that we have for you is Encoder Pro. I do need to mention, when you purchase that product, you get it in 2 different methods. One is the integrated method that I showed you right there, where you can launch it from within Lytec, and it will, from inside the diagnosis list, and once you search for it, you can map to it and pull it in, and it will add the code. That integrated functionality is actually only available to our professional and client server versions of Lytec. So if you are on single or multi-user version, You can still get Encoder Pro, but it's going to be more of a standalone. You'd use it to look up and find your codes and things like that, but it wouldn't actually import into your system. Not 100% sure why that is. It is a third-party product, though, and I do need to make you aware of that. So I love the search capabilities. I love all the extra tools in it. So there are a lot of pros to that, and of course, the fact that you're not going to have to spend money on coding books because you can get all that same information in Encoder Pro is a great feature to it. If there's a downside besides if you happen to be on some of the single-user or multi-user version, so you'll get a more limited functionality in Encoder Pro. The only other downside is that you're going to have to you'd search for them one at a time. And that may be on the good side. It means you have access to the entire library without clogging up your diagnosis list with every code out there. But just be aware of that. You do have to add those codes into your system by looking them up and then pulling them in. All right, and then that last way again is just if it's going to transfer, if you send those transactions over from your electronic health records or your EMR systems, Lytec MD or McKesson Practice Choice, there is no manual entry or preloading when they transfer over. If the code's not there, it will just create it for you, and it does include the mapping, so a lot of upsides to that. All right, so I'm going to talk now about the ICD10 testing process. I'm going to be honest that this close to the deadline, your options for testing are going to be very limited at this point. They've been testing, most payers have been, and clearinghouses. I know Relay Health is the one that we can actually support ourselves. Relay Health has been testing for the last 2 years, so once this month hit, a lot of the more advanced testing that was available was gone, and so your options might be very limited at this point. But if you have any options to test, it's still a good idea to try to figure that out before October 1st because you don't want to have any surprises. So I am going to just touch on it for you. The testing process that you go through is, first of all, of course, to make sure you've gone through those settings that I just did in Lytec, to make sure your insurance companies are set up and that it knows which dates are the effective dates for your codes and which code set it's going to be using. Make sure you've got ICD10 codes loaded in there, right? Either codes that are mapped with ICD9s, or you can test with just the ICD10 codes only. So you would want to check and see, this says check payer readiness. You would want to check and see if your payers are still offering any testing or your clearinghouse is offering any testing. And then, of course, you would want to submit your test claim and monitor the results just to make sure that they received it and that everything's good. I am going to, we've had some calls into support these last few months that I think it's worthwhile to pause for a moment and bring this up. And that is that in the past, the clearinghouses, if you're sending to a clearinghouse, there were clearinghouses that offered what they called print image support. So, just to give you a little bit of history, back in 2012, that was the effective date for a big change in the industry back then, and that was that under HIPAA rules, they were requiring all the electronic transmissions, all of your electronic claims had to be sent in the ANSI 5010 format. So way back then, Lytec was compliant and compatible to be able to send ANSI 5010 formatted claims, electronic claims, directly from the program. So what that means is it's already in the HIPAA specified format for you when it leaves your product. There were still, because I think people were set up on what they call the print image claims prior to that date, there were still some clearinghouses that, of course, were still accepting print image format, and then they were converting it into that ANSI 5010 format for you. Over the years, we've seen that, insurance companies, or sorry, not insurance, clearinghouses that were supporting that method dwindle, and, the list kept getting shorter and shorter. So most clearinghouses we saw send letters out to their to their clients back in before April 1st of 2014, because April 1st of 2014 is when that new claim form went into effect. So most people, if they're using that print image format, you had to have gone through a process with your clearinghouse to map to that print image format so that they could kind of line up where they were going to pull certain information from so that they could pull it into their system and then convert it into ANSI 5010. With that new claim form coming out, a lot of them just decided they were no longer going to try to handle or convert that data because the claim form, the image that you were sending, was going to have to change. So by and large, I think most of our clearinghouses dropped off of print image last year and just said we're no longer supporting it. However, that new claim form was really released to get us ready for ICD10 ahead of this October deadline. So if you looked at that claim form, you notice that the big changes on it is that it could accommodate the ICD10 codes. In the short term, we were still marking that we're sending an ICD, like it gives you the option to mark if you're sending an ICD9 or an ICD10, and then obviously the actual codes would fill out differently. So there's a lot of logic built into those forms to know what to pull onto the form and things like that. But there were still some clearinghouses that we found that were still even supporting print image after that deadline because they could kind of just tweak it on their system to say, hey, they're sending an ICD9 code. We really don't have to do much at this point. But now that this new deadline has come out for, hey, we're only accepting ICD10 at this point, we're getting a few more calls of clearinghouses that are, clients that are using clearinghouses that don't support the print image for ICD10 codes. So I bring all that up because that is not something that you're going to want to have to deal with after October 1st. If you can imagine, there's going to be a lot going on come October 1st as far as like rejected claims and things like that. You don't want to be getting a rejected claim simply because you're not even sending in a format that they can accept. You're already going to have enough to deal with as far as like making sure that you're using codes that are supporting reimbursements and things like that. You don't want to have to deal with that your claim is not even making it there because, if you're still just learning codes, there might just be a % of your claims that get rejected. But if you're using a format that's no longer supported, that's a guaranteed 100% of your cash flow would immediately be cut off because you can't even get the claim in the right format. So I'm bringing that all up because please don't wait until October 1st to figure out if your clearinghouse is still supporting you on a print image claim if that's the format that you're sending in. Keep in mind that you have the capability in Lytec to send in ANSI 5010 format, which is the HIPAA compliant format. You just have to make sure that it's configured in order to send that way. So if you contact your clearinghouse, if you're sending print image right now, you contact them and you need to get switched over. One, you do need to coordinate that with your clearinghouse so that they know that you're going to start sending in the different, the ANSI 5010 format. And then you need to contact us and make sure that you get it configured properly for your clearinghouse. The software, there's no additional cost for the software itself. However, you do need to work with an EDI specialist because there is setup involved in making sure that that it's set up properly for the clearinghouse or the payer if you're sending directly to a payer that you're sending to. So they can go in and make sure that all the settings are correct and get you squared away for that. So again, don't wait to the last minute to figure that one out. Real quick way to tell if you're using print image or not is just simply to, if you're in Lytec and you go to billing, if you're not using revenue management, if you're not clicking on this button to send your claims, then you're sending in print image format, okay? And revenue management, again, is the tool that's included in your software to send in the ANSI 5010 format where you just need to make sure that it's configured for you. All right, so if you can submit a test claim right now, and it's still a good idea if your clearinghouse is allowing it, again, your choices are going to be somewhat limited at this point, but if you can submit a test claim, there's a few things that you need to do. First of all, you're going to need to go back into that insurance company, find the insurance company or companies that you're going to send a test claim for, and you're going to temporarily change this to say, I'm going to send ICD10s, and I'd probably set the effective date like September 1st. So the claim that you create, your test claim, needs to have a date of service that is after your effective date. So if you set it back to like September 1st, you put in a charge for sometime in September for your test claim, then you at least know that the system is telling it to pull the ICD10 code instead of the ICD9. So that's going to be step one, is to make sure that you set your insurance that effective date back to a date prior to the date of service you're using for your test claim. The next thing that you're going to need to do is put revenue management in test mode. So if you go into billing, you click on revenue management, that's going to launch revenue management for you. All right? To put revenue management in test mode, you're going to go up to configure, and then you're going to go down to receivers. And that will open up the receiver list for you. So if, again, Relay Health is the one that we can actually support end-to-end for you. So besides just Lytec, we can support you on Relay Health. So you're not stuck in that situation where the clearinghouse might be telling you you need to fix it in Lytec, and we're telling you something going on at the clearinghouse. We actually can support you on both sides of it to even look at the claims to see why it's being denied and stuff like that. So I'm going to talk mostly about Relay Health because I feel like we can best serve our customers when they're on Relay Health. So if you have typically you would have like your Relay Health or your clearinghouse receiver set up for claims. So you would find that receiver, and then you would come over, scroll over to where it says transactions, and if you hit this down, if you click on this, it's going to expand this window where you're just going to click a little check box right here saying, hey, it's in test mode. You close that, you hit save, and then you go and send your claims as you normally would through revenue management. When you're done with that, make sure that you back all that out. After you send your test claims, you need to come back into revenue management. You need to come back in here and take it back out of test mode and save it. So that the rest of the claims that you're sending out are not going to be sent as test claims, so they'll get processed. And then you, of course, need to go back to the insurance and change that setting or that effective date for that. All right? So that's essentially how you're going to create your test claims to submit them if you're still doing any testing right now. All right, and then I'm going to pull this back up for us. So I'm going to just quickly review this. There are 3 levels of ICD10 testing that are offered. Validation testing is the one that if there is testing still available, this is probably the one that you'll be able to do. And validation testing just simply means that you're going to send it to your clearinghouse, and they are going to just acknowledge or tell you, yep, we got the claim, we can see the ICD10 codes. End-to-end testing was our highest level of testing. Unfortunately, I think all payers have closed that out at this point. They've been doing it for the last 2 years. But what that would have done is test it all the way to the payer, and then the payer would actually have returned remit information to tell you not just that they received it, but to tell you what your reimbursement would have been based on the codes that you provided and the services that you built. And you might find some of this, and that's called self-supported testing. This is with individual insurance carriers. Some of them offer self-supported testing where instead of sending the claim through your clearinghouse, or I would call it your normal method of sending to them they would allow you to load a claim up to their website where they could validate it at that point and acknowledge or tell you if that was a claim that was going to be accepted into their system. All right, so you might still find some of those available. If you do find any of these available, I would encourage you to do it because, again, it's just better to have that peace of mind to know that it's going to go properly. I will mention one other thing. If you have been using revenue management for some time now, there there's a possibility, if you've been using revenue management for some time now to send your claims, that you might have a custom configuration. So if you're using revenue management prior to upgrading to Lytec 2014 or Lytec 2015, typically you only have to have revenue management configured for your clearinghouse or your payer just one time, and then it's good. But because of this big change, if you had a custom configuration where we had to create what we call a custom iGuide for transmitting your claims, it's possible that when you upgraded, that custom configuration was not updated to accommodate ICD10. So again, that's one more reason why if you can test, it's good. You can still at least contact us, and we would be able to confirm or tell you if you're on a custom configuration and whether or not we need to make some changes or updates to that to support ICD10. If it wasn't a custom configuration, if for your clearinghouse or payer that you're sending to, we were able to use one of the standard guides to send through the system, then when you upgraded, it did update your receiver to send ICD10 codes. But I just wanted to point that out because, again, it might be possible that you need to have some updates to your system if you had something custom going on. So you can contact us, and we would be able to help you with that. So some of the resources, of course, that we have available for you. One, we try to get as much information out there as we can. We've been holding webinars for the last few years. Hopefully this was just a refresher for you, and you were able to join us back in early 2014 and earlier this year as well to learn some of this information. But if that's not enough for you, some of our customers just feel more comfortable with what we call our one-on-one training. So we can actually connect right to your system and have a trainer work with you to answer your individual questions and make sure they go through those settings with you to make sure that you're properly configured for ICD10. So I do want you to know that that resource is available to you. You can contact your sales representative, and they can give you pricing and information to get that scheduled and set up for you. Other thing to keep in mind is as we're getting to the state, if you're getting rejections or things like that, we would, of course, encourage you to work with our support team. We have a phenomenal support team with loads of experience in, in Lytec, in claims, and even in ICD10. We've been helping people through testing and things like that for the last little while. So it's inevitable that things are going to likely come up as you're going through this transition. It's the biggest transition in healthcare in 35 years. So it's not just you that had to upgrade. The insurance payers had to upgrade their systems. Everybody is kind of been in beta mode for this last little bit. And if anybody has ever gone through beta before, you know that we write everything that we can with the expectation of what it should be. And then we find that there's always tweaks or things that need to happen because all the systems across the board are have been upgraded or updated. So, and different payers can have different requirements and things like that. So if you're having any issues, I would highly encourage you to, now more than ever, be on a support contract. We want to help you. We enjoy helping you. We want to make sure that you're successful. But the only way that we can do that is if you're on a support contract with us so that we can be there for you in your time of need and get those issues resolved. We also need you to be reporting things to us. So if there are things that McKesson needs to address as far as in service packs or anything like that have to change at the development level, then of course we can get those things pushed through as quickly as possible so that service packs and things like that can be released if they're needed. With that said, I do want to point out that the only version that service packs will be released for is for Lytec 2015. So if my advice to anybody that's on anything other than 2015 is to upgrade to Lytec 2015 and to try to do it as soon as possible so that you're not having to make financial decisions, especially in the middle of a time where your claims may be reduced or your payments may be reduced because you're not getting claims through. If we find that, if Lytec finds that a service pack needs to be written, they only write those updates for the current version of the product. Lytec 2014 was released actually back prior to the first deadline, which was October 1st of 2014. It was the version that was ready to support that. New features and functionality have come out in the product since then. Even though the industry delayed, Lytec did not. So there is a new version of the product that has some pretty cool features like our mobile intake, which allows patients to register their information like on an iPad or an Android-type device in the office and check them in and update insurance information and even collect medical history and things like that. There's other benefits for Lytec 2015 besides just being compliant for ICD10, but I did want to point that out because if you're on 2015, you just kind of have that peace of mind that if anything happens, that the service pack is released, and there's even Lytec 2014 had a service pack released. We have not released the service pack, or McKesson has not for 2015 yet. So the likelihood of a service pack is very high, and you just want to be on that version so that you have that peace of mind again. So the best way that we can notify you of any of those service packs, that always kind of breaks my heart when I hear that people just didn't know that there was, they've been suffering with some issue and they didn't know that there was something that was released that would resolve it for them. Those updates are always loaded up to our website for you to download, and then we notify you through the blog. So if you are not a subscriber of the blog, I would highly encourage you to do that, just so that you're not having to go back and monitor, but you actually need to give us permission to email you information about updates and things like that. And the way that you do that is just by going to azcomp.com/blog, and on that main page, you just put your email address in there and hit subscribe, and then you're all set. We can keep you up to date on when there are service pack releases, when there is new industry news, or anything that, again, is going to fulfill our purpose, which is to empower you to deliver the best care. So we want you to have that information, and this is the best way that we can make it available to you. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lance so he can talk about some of our takeaways and close it up for the Q&A. Oh, Lance, I'm sorry. I might have you on mute. There you go.
Great. Thanks, Lori. Okay, real quick, before I get to the questions and answers, I just want to finish up with a few takeaways here, and I hope everybody walks away with something. First, we want to make sure that everyone understands. And I believe on this call, we know that there's quite a few people on this call today that are on a Lytec 2014 version. We highly recommend everyone to be on the latest Lytec 2015 version, just as Lori may have discussed. Only that version will receive the service packs or any updates or hot flashes that may occur. Every version always has at least 1 or 2 service packs in each release. And this is, like we said, is the biggest change for everybody, both the industry and both software vendors that have to change products to accommodate for this ICD10. So come October 1st, that's the moment we're going to know if everything works. And if there are changes, they're going to be done only on version 2015. And as Lori mentioned, after October 1st as well, we show right now 60% of our customers still aren't on 2014 version, which means there's going to be a big wake-up call for the industry for a lot of customers that realize they can't even get claims paid. So we expect October and November to be a very, very busy time for those that have procrastinated and waited. What I don't want is people like yourselves that are on this call that are a part of that proactive practice, they're trying to stay ahead of the curve, to get put in that line that if something does change and you need an update and you have to get to 2015 to get that update, that you're now in line with all the other people that waited last second. And I just don't want to see a delay and everything else that may happen to you. So my recommendation for everybody is always be on the latest version so you get those updates freely. Second, make a plan. Look through some of those sites that Lori shared earlier. Make a plan. Make sure you guys are ready and ready for this big change. Go ahead and start planning the Lytec. Get your ICD10 set up. with the dates appropriate to start using the new claims codes and so forth. And then if you can, well, I guess we don't have to talk about the testing because most of it's too late, but just make sure you can send the claims. And by that I mean make sure you're not sending by print image, as that is not going to be accepted. And then obviously you can put through the resources we provided here. We will have a follow-up email in a day or two to give you kind of some of the recaps of this event, along with some links to the recorded session so you guys can see this and rehash any information you need. And from that, I'm just going to go back now to questions and answers. So if anybody has any questions, go ahead and post your question in the question box on the right side, and I'll just start going through some of those questions. So the first question comes, actually before I go there, Laura, can you go to the next slide? I think I had one more thing to.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Can I not?
You're right. Okay.
Obviously, there's our contact number if you need to talk to us or talk to a sales rep to get a quote for anything. If you need to get the latest version. If you are in version 2014, obviously you do have the best discount promo price possible. It's cheaper to stay current every year than to wait 2 years. It's a lot more expensive to wait 2 or 3 years than it is to keep current every year. The other thing we have added, we do have a huge YouTube channel now of lots of different videos and both tech support videos to webinar type videos. So go ahead and feel free to visit our YouTube channel, or you can also go to our blog, which we try to keep all the updated information. So you just go to AZCOMP.com/blog and you can subscribe there, and that's any changes or any updates or anything that's pertinent information we want our clients to know about. We usually post them there, and so you'll get if you subscribe, you'll get an email posting of that and so forth. And I guess the last thing here is we do have Lytec subscription pricing now available, so if you don't want to take those big hit upgrades all the time, you can just pay a one-time fee now. Starting now, I should say, this is like a single user price. Starting at $3.99 a month, you're going to get a bundle that includes all your Lytec upgrades, and includes us assisting, helping you with the installation, doing any of the data conversions if needed, and then you're also part of the phenomenal technical support. So all that's all inclusive. So you don't have any additional fees or different things you have to worry about. So everything's kind of included, which a lot of our clients have been asking for, and it's more budget friendly for them to pay monthly versus big fees up front and every year. So anyway, that's available. So if you're interested in subscription pricing, you can ask about that. So now I'll go ahead and move to some of the questions. The first question I have here, it comes from, looks like it's about the codes itself. It says, is there a way to delete an ICD10 code once entered under a diagnosis code?
Yes, so you should be able to delete that. The only thing that would stop you from being able to delete it is if you've actually used that code on one of your billings or on a claim. So, but if it's a code that was entered in an error and then never used, you should be able to pull that claim up, or sorry, pull that diagnosis up and then delete it from the system. The other thing that you can do if you have used it, though, is there is an inactive button in that field, so you can just make it inactive.
Okay. The next question comes, they bought the latest version, and they just purchased the disks with the ICD10 codes to install next week. Do they need to link the ICD9 to the ICD10, or will the disks do it for them?
Okay, so if you did buy that import tool to pull all the ICD10s in, which it sounds like you might have gotten, like the codes on disk instead of the Encoder Pro, then it will load them without any mappings. It's not required that you map those codes. So if you're one of those scenarios where you're just going to have to start using ICD10 on all of your claims after October 1st, then it's not necessary that you have a map. Mappings just are going to help you if you, again, are in any of those scenarios where you're either trying to use those claims today and still have the ICD9s go on the claim, or you're having to deal with some payers that are not taking ICD10 yet and some that are. If that's the case, then you're better served by having a mapping, because then you won't have to remember per payer which ones to use an ICD10 code with versus which ones to use an ICD9 code with. So I hope that answers that. It's not required to do the mappings is what you should gain out of that, but there might be a good reason for you to do a mapping if you're based on your scenario and your practice.
From there, I don't actually have, just got one more question here. If I just wanted to pay, so if you do have another question, this is the time to throw it out there, because I just have one last question I'm showing right here. And then, so if you have one, go ahead and post it up there. So right now I show a question, if I just wanted to pay one time for someone to assist load Encoder Pro, what does that cost?
Okay, sure. What I'd encourage you to do is to contact our sales, and they can get you that pricing. If you call that number that's up on the screen, they can help you right away to give you pricing on that. Unfortunately, I don't know those numbers right off the top of my head, but they can work with you to make sure that they've got the correct price for you. But we absolutely can do that. We help practices all the time to do their ICD10 setup and train them on features. So schedule is filling up quick though, so you would want to try to get that call in as quickly as possible.
Great. Okay, I don't have any further questions unless somebody else has another question. So I want to thank everybody for attending. I want to wish everyone the best as they go through this transition. Definitely make a plan and look for an email here in a few days from us. And, well, as I say that, I just got one more question. I'll go ahead and answer this, and then we'll wrap it up. Last question here is we have a specialty office, so it'd be nice if we could map ICD9 to ICD10 with your help.
Okay, absolutely. Probably the product I would recommend for you if you are a specialty office is to go ahead and get that Encoder Pro, because Encoder Pro will have that tool within it to help you map those codes. Some of it, of course, is going to be very subjective, so we can absolutely help you with knowing how to use a tool, but we are not going to be the experts to know when you should use one code versus another. That's more of a coder or clinical type decision, but we can absolutely help make sure you have the right tools and that you know how to use those tools. And that's the one, if you're really concerned about having mappings, which can help on reporting sides and things like that as well if you do have it mapped, then I would encourage you to get Encoder Pro because it can help you with the mapping.
Great. All right, I want to appreciate, again, thank everyone for being here. Thank you, Lori, for the presentation. And I, again, wish you all luck on all this. And let's make it through this transition. And hopefully we'll all be alive after it's all said and done. So,
all right,
thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Hey, thanks for watching. Hope you liked the video and found it helpful. If you did, let us know by giving us a thumbs up by clicking on the like button below. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, feel free to write those in the comments section below. And if you want to get more helpful videos like this one, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Thanks!